Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today I want to talk about the legacy of Live Aid because it was on this day in 1985 that the biggest televised music festival of all time at that point, and still one of the very biggest, took place. Now, what is the legacy of this momentous event in music history, in television history, and in charitable history? And we'll get to the very controversial aspects of that in a moment. Well, I want to examine this through the prism of people who were skeptical of the event at the time. Because since then, a lot of people have, in hindsight, come to criticize it. But at the time, when Frank Zappa was asked what he thought about it, he called it the largest cocaine money laundering scheme in history. And as there were at every major concert at that time, there were plenty of cocaine dealers, both at the show at JFK Stadium and at Wembley Stadium, the two stadiums where they had the simultaneous show that was broadcast all over the world. Um, there were also other criticisms that came a bit later. The whole origin of Live Aid and the charity single Do They Know It's Christmas, released several months before in 1984, December 84, and then Live Aid was summer of 85. It's come under a lot of criticism in hindsight. The background was the very long-running Ethiopian civil war, where various ethno-nationalist rebel factions were fighting the communist dictatorship known as the Derg. I've always thought that's a cool sounding name, all politics aside. But anyway, there was, in addition to being quite violent, there was a famine that raged in the mid 1980s as a result of the Civil War. And it was in 84 that a group of artists came together to do a charity single called Do They Know It's Christmas? Objectively a good song, but the lyrics have come under a lot of criticism because they're very patronizing. The so-called white savior complex is very much invoked, and the idea is there won't be snow in Africa this Christmas time. Well, most of that is just due to the fact that no snow has ever been expected. There won't be snow in Palm Springs, California this Christmas time either. So it's little things like that that when you look at it under the microscope, it's some would call it patronizing, some have called it racist. Um, I think from a musical point of view, some of the lyrics seem a bit corny in hindsight, a bit hokey, even though the actual track and the actual musical performance is still very much good. So there was that. And a lot of that carried on into Live Aid, where it looked and felt like a kind of music industry Woodstock, a very professionalized version of Woodstock. MTV was there, ABC, BBC, all of these big giants that don't exactly scream empathy and charity. But millions of dollars were raised, but many people subsequent to the concert, and this is really sort of amped up in recent years, they've accused the people that were supposed to organize the charitable donations of being very sloppy at best and corrupt at worst, and that much of the money went into the hands of some sinister forces who used it to buy weapons that were used to kill civilians, or expensive cars or Rolexes, or, all of the things that charitable donations should not go to do. Bob Geldof, the musician who organized the event, has strenuously denied all of these allegations, but the allegations continue to flow, and it has, in the perception of the public, put a bit of a damper on the event. There was sort of a Live Aid 2.0 in 2005 where there was no money raised, so that avoided that controversy. It was just about raising awareness about what I don't even remember. It was done at the time of a G8 summit. It's now the G7, but it was at that time the group of 8 nations, which again, you don't include China, but you do include Italy. Nothing against or for one nation. I love Chinese people. I love Italian people. I love everyone. But it's just a bit weird. Again, music and politics go together very well when there's an artist expressing his or her deeply felt views on something. But some of these larger than life events, it almost seems as though the corporate and political world is becoming the music. I mean, we all know what the music industry is. It runs on money and cocaine. I mean, it did when the music industry was a thing. Now it just runs on Spotify and Spotify shareholders, Apple and Apple shareholders. But there's just something about it that rubs some people the wrong way. And that was the point Frank Zappa was making. Prince, who was huge in 1985, around the time of the original Live Aid, he decided not to participate. The other notable absence, and he never really spoke about it, was Michael Jackson. Now, Michael Jackson was obviously involved in composing "We Are the World," a charity single with Stevie Wonder, and so many other major artists, but he didn't participate in Live Aid. Um, when you take things as a whole, I think it's best to look at Live Aid from two perspectives. There's this socio-political perspective that Zappa was looking at it from, and I think Zappa got it right. In hindsight, especially, the optics are pretty bad. There's a famine, but we're here having a great time, drinking champagne, snorting cocaine. And then the money that we've raised from regular old people, many of whom are not rich, the people watching the show, much of that allegedly went to sinister forces doing either sinister or greedy things. So the optics are bad, and Frank Zappa got this right, and it's another example of him being really ahead of his time, because everyone at this time was sort of glazing Bob Geldof and, oh, what a great event this is. How could we have never thought of this before? Where Zappa's skepticism turned out to lead him to some very correct places. And that's again why we should always celebrate Zappa's honesty, intellect, and authenticity. From a musical perspective, which is the other perspective through which we can look at Live Aid, there were some really, really good performances. Queen, obviously famous for stealing the show, but there were many other good performances. The Who were very good, minus Keith Moon, who had gone by that point, but they still were very good. David Bowie, very good. There were some very bad performances. A fake Led Zeppelin reunion, if you will, was really bad. Maybe the cocaine had something to do with that. But musically, it was very interesting, and it was a decent time capsule of things. These were the artists that were either really big or looking to make a comeback in 1985. But I think overall the legacy is a bit stayed. The idea of you have of mostly white European or American celebrities um, doing things for Africa that don't actually work out necessarily, allegedly. It's a bit of it's a bit of a bygone era where there's something patronizing about it in part. I know Bob Geldof would deny that, but I think that we've moved more into an age, maybe because of social media, allowing us now to interact directly with people throughout the world without needing an intermediary or proxy. That this whole idea of, oh, let's let ABC television and the BBC tell people what to think. Let's let Bob Geldof tell us in the world who and where and what needs to be saved from what. Now people are able to articulate their own problems and their own desires much more directly, which I think too makes the optics of Live Aid seem somewhat obsolete. But this is just one version of an opinion that obviously is a musical event. It's very good, and when money is raised for civilians in need, that can only ever be a good thing. But again, the big sort of question mark is, did that really happen? And there are still a lot of arguments over whether or not it did. I think Frank Zappa was right. Let me know what you think. Like, subscribe. We will see you next time. Take care.